A single mother struggles daily to support her children with dignity and courage. At the grocery store checkout, she faces a humiliating moment when she realizes she can't pay for everything. A stranger observes in silence and takes an unexpected action that changes everything. But this simple gesture will spark a transformation that no one could have predicted. If this beautiful story of resilience and love interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The afternoon sun streamed through the dusty windows of the bus as it crossed Central Avenue in Charlotte, bringing with it the weariness of another exhausting day. Sarah looked out the window with half-closed eyes, feeling the weight of accumulated hours on her shoulders. Beside her, Leo and Lily swung their small legs, which didn't yet reach the floor, still full of energy despite a full day at school, and then at the neighbor's house, who watched them until their mother could pick them up. They were only 7 years old, but their attentive little eyes already carried a maturity that shouldn't belong to that age. Sarah worked as a cleaning assistant in 3 different apartment complexes in the Myers Park area. She woke up at 5 in the morning, left the children ready with breakfast prepared the night before, and only returned when the sky began to darken. Her arms ached from the repetitive motions, and her hands were always dry from cleaning products, but she never complained. She didn't have time for that. Every dollar earned was counted, recounted, and distributed with surgical precision between rent, food, transportation, and the children's basic needs. On that Thursday afternoon, after picking up the kids, Sarah needed to stop by the supermarket. It wasn't a choice, it was an urgent necessity. They were out of rice, the beans were almost gone, and there was no more milk for the next morning's breakfast. She pressed her worn cloth bag against her body, feeling the thin bulk of the wallet where she kept the money left over after paying the electricity bill. She had done the math mentally 3 times during the day. It would be enough to buy the essentials, nothing extra, but it would be enough. The supermarket was near the bus stop, a popular chain that served the neighborhood. Sarah held her 2 children's hands and entered through the automatic doors, feeling the air conditioning chill the sweat on her forehead. Leo immediately asked if he could get a pack of sandwich cookies that were on sale, pointing his little finger at the colorful pile right at the entrance. Lily remained quiet, just observing her mother with those large, understanding eyes. Sarah knelt down to their level, tucking a strand of hair behind Lily's ear and lightly ruffling Leo's rebellious curls. Her voice was soft but firm. "Not today, my love. Today we need to buy only what is most important, okay? Next time we'll see if we can." Leo nodded without insisting. He already knew. Lily just took her mother's hand again, as if to say everything was okay. Sarah grabbed a basket and began walking through the aisles with quick, decisive steps. She couldn't get distracted. She picked up the most affordable bag of rice, the store-brand beans, 2 gallons of milk, eggs, a pack of pasta, a small bottle of oil, and some discounted bananas. She calculated mentally as she placed each item in the basket. When she got close to the checkout, she did one last check. It should work. It had to work. The line was relatively short. Sarah positioned herself behind an elderly lady finishing her groceries, keeping the children by her side. Leo looked curiously at the chocolates displayed near the register, but didn't ask for anything. Lily held onto the hem of her mother's skirt, very quiet. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to push away the nervousness she always felt in these moments, when every cent made a difference. Right behind her, a man joined the line with just a small basket in his hands. Robert was 42 years old, the owner of a technology company that had grown significantly in recent years, and he lived alone in a spacious apartment in the Dilworth neighborhood. He was there by chance just because he needed to buy water and something quick for dinner. He didn't usually shop at this type of supermarket. He generally ordered everything through an app. But that afternoon, he had decided to leave the office for a bit and handle things in person. He noticed the woman in front of him almost by instinct. There was something in her posture, in the way she held her children close, in the attentive way she organized the few items on the conveyor belt. Robert noticed the details unintentionally. The battered bag, the worn shoes, the simple but clean and well cared for clothes. The children, impeccably neat, still wearing their school uniforms. And then he noticed something else, something that made him truly pay attention. Her expression. There was no shame, no self-pity. There was dignity. The cashier began scanning Sarah's products. Beep, rice, beep, beans, beep, milk. Sarah followed every sound with her eyes fixed on the digital display, doing the math. When the last item was scanned, the total appeared on the screen, $53.40. Her heart tightened. She had $50. Exactly $50. "I'm sorry, but I think it came to a little more than I expected," she told the cashier, trying to keep her voice steady. "Can I put some things back?" The cashier sighed with poorly disguised impatience, discreetly rolling her eyes. Sarah felt the heat rise up her neck, but she kept her head high. "I'll put back the oil and the bananas, is that okay?" The cashier began the process of cancelling the items with mechanical, rapid movements, while a small line began to form behind Robert. Sarah could feel the stares, that silent pressure from those who wait and judge. Leo pulled at the hem of her shirt. "Mom, we don't really need the bananas, okay? We can eat something else." The childish voice, trying to help, broke something inside her. But Sarah just smiled at her son and nodded that it was fine. That was when Robert, still standing behind her, felt something strange happen in his chest. It wasn't pity. It wasn't condescension. It was respect. Pure and simple respect for the way that woman faced the situation, without creating drama, without blaming anyone, just dealing with reality head-on. And there was something more, something in the presence of those well-behaved, conscious children that touched a part of him that had been dormant for a long time. "Excuse me," Robert said, stepping forward before he even really thought about what he was doing. Sarah turned her face, surprised. He continued, keeping his tone casual, almost as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Let me pay for this for you. You don't need to take anything out." Sarah froze for a second, processing the words. No, thank you, but I can't accept that. I'll pay, I just needed to remove a few things, but I'll pay the rest." Her voice came out louder than she intended, loaded with a mixture of surprise and embarrassment. Robert made a slight gesture with his hand, as if dismissing the formality. "I know you're going to pay, I'm just stepping in to make it easier. It's not a favor, it's just a gesture. Please, accept it." And before she could protest again, he was already swiping his card at the machine. The transaction was approved in seconds. $53.40. Paid. Sarah stood there, not knowing how to react. The cashier was already starting to pack the groceries, putting everything into plastic bags in a hurry to finish. The children looked at the man with curiosity and a mix of shyness. Robert just smiled slightly, picked up his own basket and made a move to step away. But Sarah reached out almost instinctively, lightly touching his arm. "Wait, please," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I need to know your name. I will pay you back. I promise I can't just accept this and walk away." Robert stopped, turned and looked into her eyes. They were tired eyes, but firm. The eyes of someone who didn't give up. "My name is Robert, but you don't need to worry about paying anything back. It was just a gesture, truly." "My name is Sarah," she replied, holding the bag handle tightly. "And yes, I need to pay you back. It's not a matter of pride, it's a matter of character. I don't accept things without giving back. Please, give me a way to get in touch." There was something in that insistence that touched Robert even deeper. It wasn't empty stubbornness, it was integrity. He hesitated for a moment, then grabbed a pen near the register and wrote his phone number on a piece of paper the cashier handed him somewhat awkwardly. He gave it to Sarah. "All right, but no pressure, okay? Whenever you can, if you want to." Sarah took the paper as if it was something precious and tucked it carefully into her wallet. "Thank you. Thank you so much. I will pay you back. You can be sure of that." And then, holding the children's hands and the grocery bag, she walked out of the supermarket with her head held high, but with her heart beating wildly. Robert stood there for a few seconds, watching her silhouette disappear through the automatic doors. He paid for his own groceries on autopilot, his mind still processing what had just happened. It wasn't the first time he had helped someone. He had donated to institutions, contributed to social causes and made charitable gestures before. But never had he felt this. That strange sensation that something important had just happened. Something that went far beyond the money he had spent on his card. By the time he left the supermarket, it was already getting dark. Robert walked to his car, an imported model parked nearby. But before getting in, he looked around almost unintentionally, as if searching for her. He didn't see her. Sarah must have been at the bus stop already, or perhaps already on a crowded bus heading home with the children and the groceries. He got into the car, turned on the music low, and sat there for a few minutes before starting the engine. The image of that woman wouldn't leave his head. The firm posture, the clear voice, even in difficulty, the way she cared for her children. And the kids. Those children so small but so aware, so well-behaved, so full of understanding. Something in all of it moved him in a way he couldn't explain. Robert drove home on autopilot, crossing the streets of Charlotte without really paying attention to the way. When he arrived at the apartment, everything was exactly as he had left it in the morning. Silent, organized, empty. He left the groceries in the kitchen, changed clothes and sat on the large living room sofa, looking at the space around him. He had everything. A beautiful home, a successful company, financial stability. But as he looked at that silence, for the first time in a long time, Robert wondered if he really had anything at all. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Sarah climbed the stairs of the simple building where she lived in the West End neighborhood, carrying the grocery bag in one hand and holding the children with the other. When they entered the small but always clean apartment, she finally let her legs give way a little, sitting in the kitchen chair while Leo and Lily ran to change out of their uniforms. She took the paper with the phone number out of her wallet and looked at it for a long time. She didn't know that man. She knew nothing about him besides his name. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was going to pay that money back. It didn't matter how long it took. It didn't matter the effort she had to make. That was a debt. And Sarah always paid her debts. She tucked the paper carefully into a kitchen drawer, in an envelope where she kept important documents. Then she took a deep breath and began preparing dinner for her children. Rice, beans, scrambled eggs. Simple, but made with care. While she cooked, her thoughts returned to that moment at the supermarket, to the way he intervened without making a scene, without humiliating her, without turning it into something bigger than it was. There was respect in that gesture, and that meant more than the money itself. That night, when the children were already sleeping in the room they shared, Sarah stayed awake longer than usual, lying in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about how strange life was, how a random moment in a supermarket could generate so many confusing feelings. Gratitude, embarrassment, determination, and something else she couldn't name. On the other side of the city, Robert was also awake, sitting on the balcony of his apartment, looking at the lights of Charlotte scattered in the night. He picked up his phone a few times, thinking about he wasn't sure what, and then put it down again. That woman, Sarah, had left a mark, and he had no idea why. He only knew that something had changed that afternoon, something small but definitive, like a seed planted without realizing it, which one day, perhaps, would grow and transform everything. The days following the encounter at the supermarket were strange for Robert. He tried to return to his normal routine, diving into the work that had always occupied all his attention, but something had changed. During meetings with clients, while analyzing spreadsheets and approving projects, his mind returned to that scene, the woman with the firm posture, the well-behaved children, that brief but intense moment of human connection. He picked up his phone several times a day, looking at the screen waiting for something he didn't even know what it was, and then put it away again. At the company, Robert had always been known as someone focused and distant. Polite, fair but reserved. He had built his business practically alone after a marriage that had ended years ago without great trauma, just the natural drifting apart of two people who realized they had nothing left to say to each other. He had no children. He hadn't built any new serious relationships. Life was summarized by work, professional commitments, and solitary dinners in sophisticated restaurants or at home, always in the silence of his apartment. But now, for the first time in a long time, that silence was bothersome. He returned home after a full day of work and noticed the emptiness in a way he never had before. He turned on the television just to have some background sound. He prepared dinner for one and ate while looking at his phone, checking work messages without really caring about any of them. And he thought of her, of Sarah, of the name he repeated mentally, as if testing the sound, the cadence, the meaning. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Sarah lived her days with the same intensity as always, but with an extra weight in her chest. She woke up early, prepared breakfast for the children, took Leo and Lily to school, took the bus to work, and gave herself to the hours of cleaning with her usual dedication. But now every dollar she saved had a specific destination. She set aside an envelope where she began to collect the money to pay Robert back. It wasn't easy. After covering all the essential expenses of the month, very little was left. But Sarah was determined. She cut some small expenses she used to allow herself, like the snack she sometimes bought at the bakery to share with the kids on Sunday, or the chocolate milk she occasionally brought home. They were small sacrifices, but they hurt in a silent way. Leo and Lily noticed, but they didn't complain. They never complained. A week after the encounter, Sarah had already managed to save $20. She kept the folded bills in the envelope with a mix of pride and impatience. $33.40 to go. Every cent mattered. She did the math mentally, planning how she would get the rest. Maybe if she managed to do one extra cleaning job on the weekend, if she asked a neighbor to watch the kids, or maybe if she waited until the end of the month, when she would receive payment from one of the apartment complexes. But the more the days passed, the more that debt weighed on her. It wasn't just the money, it was the memory of that gesture, of that intervention that had saved her from a greater embarrassment, of that man who had paid without creating drama, without demanding anything in return. There was something in it that moved her in a way she couldn't explain. It wasn't attraction. It wasn't passion. It was something more subtle, more profound. It was mutual recognition, though not spoken in words. 2 weeks after the meeting, on a Saturday afternoon, Sarah finally gathered the full amount. $53.40, counted cent by cent, kept carefully inside the white envelope. She looked at that money for a long time, feeling a mixture of relief and nervousness. Now she needed to call him. She took the crumpled paper she kept in the kitchen drawer, with the phone number written in his handwriting. Her fingers trembled a bit as she dialed the numbers on her old phone. She called once, but hung up before it connected. She took a deep breath. She couldn't be afraid. It was just returning the money, nothing more. It was keeping her word. She called again, and this time she let it ring. Robert was in his office, finishing some emails on a Saturday he had decided to work to occupy his mind. When the phone rang with an unknown number, he almost didn't answer, but something made him accept the call. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was low but firm. "Hi, Robert, it's Sarah. We met at the supermarket 2 weeks ago. You paid for my groceries." Robert felt his heart race in a way he didn't expect. He stood up automatically, as if physical formality helped organize his thoughts. "Hi, Sarah. Of course I remember. How are you doing?" "I'm doing well, thank you. Look, I'm calling because I managed to get the money together, the $53.40. I wanted to arrange a place to give it back to you." Robert opened his mouth to say she didn't need to, that she could keep the money, that it wasn't necessary. But then he remembered her expression that day, the respectful insistence, the dignity with which she spoke about giving back, and he understood that refusing would be to disrespect the very thing he most admired about her. "All right," he said, softening his tone. "Where would you prefer to meet?" Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to seem presumptuous, suggesting somewhere near where he lived or worked, but she also didn't want to make him cross the city. "There's a park near where I live, in the West End, West Side Park. Can we meet there?" Robert mentally noted the address. "Yes, we can. Does tomorrow afternoon work for you?" "It does," Sarah confirmed. "Is 3 o'clock okay?" "Perfect. See you tomorrow, then." When they hung up, Sarah stood in the kitchen holding the phone, feeling her heart beating fast. She had done it. She was going to return the money, fulfill her promise, and then all of that would be behind her. She could move on without that weight on her conscience. But as she thought about it, a small part of her felt something she didn't want to admit. A curiosity. A desire to see him again, even if just for a few minutes, just to thank him properly. Robert, for his part, spent the rest of Saturday and Sunday morning with a strange anxiety taking over him. He changed clothes 3 times before leaving, looking for something that didn't seem too formal or too casual. He wanted to look accessible, not intimidating. He left home an hour before the agreed time, drove to the neighborhood on the other side of town, and parked near the park. It was a simple place, with some concrete benches, a small basketball court where kids were playing, and some trees offering shade. Robert sat on one of the benches and waited, observing the movement around him, families walking, street vendors, dogs running loose. Everything so different from the antiseptic and silent world in which he lived. When he saw Sarah approaching, walking along the sidewalk with the envelope in her hand and a simple Sunday dress, Robert stood up automatically. She was alone, without the children. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail, and she looked different from the tired woman he had seen at the supermarket. Still tired, yes, but there was something lighter in her expression. "Hi," she said, coming close. "I'm sorry if I made you come all this way." "Not at all," Robert replied, pointing to the bench. "Would you like to sit?" They sat side by side with a respectful distance between them. Sarah held out the envelope to him. "It's all here, $53.40. I counted it twice to be sure." Robert took the envelope but didn't open it. He just held it between his fingers, looking at her. "You didn't have to do this, you know, but I understand it was important to you." "It was," Sarah confirmed. "Just because I'm in need doesn't mean I'll accept things without giving back. I always pay what I owe. Always." There was a brief silence, but not an uncomfortable one. Robert put the envelope in his pocket and then turned slightly toward her. "And how are things? The children? Work?" Sarah smiled slightly, a tired but genuine smile. "Everything is the usual rush. Leo and Lily are well, thank God. They are sweethearts. They help me a lot. And work? Well, it's hard, but it pays the bills." "Are they your only children?" Robert asked with sincere curiosity. "They are twins. They came together as if they already knew they'd have to support each other." And she laughed softly, a sound that surprised even herself. "Sometimes I think they take care of me more than I take care of them." Robert felt something tighten in his chest. It must be hard raising two on your own. "It is," Sarah admitted, but without self-pity. "But it's also good. They give me a reason to keep going every day. When I wake up tired, when I think I won't manage, I look at them and remember why I do all this." "And their father?" Robert risked asking, afraid of invading delicate territory. Sarah sighed, but didn't seem bothered by the question. He left when they were still babies, said he wasn't ready to be a father, that his life was something else. I didn't chase after him, didn't ask for anything. I prefer to do everything alone than depend on someone who doesn't want to be here. Robert nodded, admired once again by the strength of that woman. "And you, do you have family? Anyone who helps?" "I have my mother, but she lives in West Virginia. We talk, but she has her own life, her own problems. Here in Charlotte, it's just me and the kids. But we manage. We always have." They continued talking for over an hour. Sarah told him about her work, about the challenges of balancing everything, about the small dreams she kept for her children. She wanted them to study, to have better opportunities than hers. Robert, in turn, talked about his company, about how he had built everything practically from scratch. But he omitted the loneliness he felt. It wasn't the time yet for that kind of confession. When the sun began to set and the park started emptying, Sarah looked at her watch and was startled. "Oh, I didn't see the time pass. I need to go pick up the kids from my neighbor." Robert stood up with her. It was good talking, truly. "I thought so too," Sarah said, and there was sincerity in her voice, "and thank you again for everything." They said goodbye with a handshake, formal but warm. Robert stood in the park watching Sarah walk away down the sidewalk until she disappeared around the corner. Then he returned to his car with a strange feeling in his chest. That conversation had been different from any other he had had in recent years. There was no pretense, no social masks, just two people being honest about their lives. When he got home that night, Robert took the envelope out of his pocket and placed it on the living room table. He had no intention of spending that money. He knew that those $53.40 represented sacrifice, effort, dignity. He kept the envelope in a drawer, as if it were something too valuable to be treated carelessly. Sarah, for her part, returned home feeling a mix of relief and something she couldn't name. She had fulfilled her promise, returned the money, closed that cycle. But as she prepared dinner for her children, as she heard Leo and Lily talk about their day, Her mind returned to that conversation in the park, to the way Robert listened without judging, to the way he treated her with genuine respect, without condescension. That night after the children fell asleep, she found herself wondering if she would see him again. Probably not. Their lives were completely different. Their worlds didn't cross. That had just been a brief encounter, a moment of fleeting connection. But as she lay down to sleep, she couldn't stop thinking about that afternoon in the park, about that conversation that flowed so naturally. And on the other side of town, in his silent apartment, Robert also couldn't sleep. He stayed awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Sarah, the stories she told, the strength she showed. And for the first time in a long time, he found himself wishing that hadn't ended there, that there was a way to continue, to maintain that connection that, however brief, made him feel more alive than he had in years. Nearly 2 weeks passed since the meeting in the park. Robert tried to return to his usual routine, but something had changed irreversibly. The company kept running, projects advanced, clients were served, but everything seemed mechanical, meaningless. For the first time in his life, work didn't fill the void. On the contrary, it only made it more evident how solitary his existence was. He found himself thinking of Sarah at the most unexpected moments. During meetings, while driving, before sleeping, he thought of the stories she had told, the way she spoke of her children with such pride and love, the silent strength she carried. Several times he picked up his phone wanting to send a message, but he always froze. What would he say? What would be the excuse? He didn't want to seem invasive. He didn't want her to think he expected something in return for what he had done at the supermarket. Sarah, for her part, also couldn't get that conversation out of her head. While she cleaned the apartments, while she waited for the bus, while she helped Leo and Lily with their homework, her mind returned to that afternoon in the park, to the way Robert listened with genuine attention, without hurry, without judgment. There was something about him that intrigued her, a kindness that seemed sincere, a loneliness she recognized in her own soul. It was Leo who unknowingly created the reason for a new meeting. On a Wednesday afternoon, while rummaging through his school backpack, he pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and handed it to his mother. "Mom, I forgot to give you this yesterday. It's a note from the teacher." Sarah opened the paper and read it carefully. It was a notice about the school science fair, which would happen the following Saturday. Each student needed to do a simple project with their parents' help. Leo had chosen to make a model of the solar system. Lily, who was in the same class, wanted to make a baking soda and vinegar volcano. "Okay, my love," Sarah said, trying to hide her concern. "We'll do it." She was already calculating the costs mentally. Styrofoam, paint, basic materials. It wasn't expensive, but it wasn't cheap either. She would have to tighten the budget again, maybe postpone buying something less urgent. That same night, while the children slept, Sarah found herself looking at her phone. She thought of Robert without knowing exactly why. Maybe because he had seemed genuinely interested when she spoke of her children. Maybe because that conversation in the park had made her feel less alone. Or maybe simply because, for the first time in a long time, she felt like sharing something of her life with someone. She gathered her courage and sent a message. "Hi, Robert, this is Sarah. How are you? I hope I'm not bothering you. I just wanted to thank you again for the conversation last week. It was good." Robert was lying on the sofa, watching a movie without paying attention, when the phone vibrated. Seeing her name on the screen, he felt his heart race. He replied almost immediately. "Hi, Sarah. Of course you're not bothering me. I really enjoyed talking too. How are things going?" The conversation flowed naturally. Sarah told him about the science fair, about the children's projects, about the rush of the week. Robert listened, or rather, read each message with attention, and then made an impulsive decision. "Look, if you want, I can help with the materials. I know a good craft store near here, and if you need help putting anything together, I'm in." Sarah hesitated. She didn't want him to think she was asking for help, but at the same time the offer was tempting. Not for the money, but for the company, for the presence. "Are you sure? I don't want to give you work." "I'm totally sure," Robert replied. "It would be a pleasure. Can it be Saturday morning?" And so that Saturday, Robert arrived by car in front of the building where Sarah lived. It was an old building with peeling paint and bars on the windows, but everything was very clean and organized. He parked and sent a message saying he was there. Minutes later, Sarah came down with Leo and Lily, one on each side. The children looked at him with curiosity and a bit of shyness. Robert knelt down to their level, smiling. "Hi guys, I'm Robert, a friend of your mum's. You must be Leo and Lily, right?" Leo nodded, always more talkative. "I'm Leo. Lily is quieter. We're going to do school projects today." "That's right," Robert confirmed. "I came to help you. Shall we go buy the materials together?" The trip to the craft store was surprisingly natural. Leo chatted non-stop, telling him about school, about his friends, about what he wanted to be when he grew up. Lily was quieter but observed everything closely, always holding her mother's hand. Sarah stayed attentive, observing each interaction between Robert and her children, ready to intervene if necessary, but realizing she didn't need to. At the store, Robert let the children choose the paint colors, the sizes of the styrofoam balls, the type of poster board. He paid for everything without a fuss, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sarah tried to split the bill, but he made a light gesture with his hand. "Let me contribute to this. It's a little thing, and it'll be cool to see the finished projects." They returned to Sarah's apartment, and Robert for the first time saw where she lived. It was small, yes. The living room merged with the kitchen. There were only 2 tiny bedrooms and a cramped bathroom, but everything was impeccably clean and organized. There were children's drawings taped to the fridge, simple but well cared for curtains on the windows, and a smell of cleanliness and fresh coffee in the air. Robert took off his blazer and rolled up his shirt sleeves. "Well, where do we start?" The following hours were a chaotic mix of spilled paint, cut styrofoam, glue everywhere, and lots of laughter. Leo was responsible for painting the planets of the solar system, with Robert helping to hold the styrofoam balls while the boy did his best with the colors. Lily, with her mother's help, molded the clay to make the volcano, concentrated on every detail. Sarah watched it all in a bit of shock, not just for the practical help, but for the way Robert interacted with her children. He didn't treat the kids with that artificial condescension of adults who don't know how to deal with children. He treated them with respect, listened to what they said, and asked genuine questions. When Leo got the color of Neptune wrong, Robert simply said they could paint over it. No drama. When Lily spilled glue on the floor, he grabbed a cloth and cleaned it with her, laughing. There was something transformative in that scene. Robert, in his normal world, would have no idea how to help children with school projects. His life was meetings, contracts, business decisions. But there, sitting on the floor of the small apartment, with paint on his hands and a genuine smile on his face, he seemed more alive than he had ever been in his boardroom. When the solar system was finally ready, with all the planets hanging on nylon threads around the sun, Leo clapped his hands in joy. "It looks beautiful. Thank you, Uncle Robert." The word uncle sounded strange and at the same time comforting. Robert felt something tighten in his chest. "You're welcome, champ. You did it all. I just helped hold things." Lily's volcano was also ready, painted brown with red details representing lava. She smiled with pride, a shy but genuine smile. Robert praised every detail, and Lily, for the first time, spoke to him spontaneously. "Can you come see us present at the fair tomorrow?" Robert looked at Sarah, asking for silent permission. She nodded slightly, still processing all of it. "Of course I'll go," he replied to Lily. "I wouldn't miss it for anything." After the projects were finished and dry, Sarah prepared a simple snack. Bread and butter, fresh coffee, and some cookies. They all sat together at the small kitchen table, squeezed but comfortable. Leo and Lily told school stories, and Robert listened with attention, asking questions and laughing along. Sarah watched that scene with a lump in her throat. It had been so long since they had had a positive male presence in their lives. Not that they needed one, she always made that clear to herself, but it was undeniable that something special was happening there. Her children were happy, at ease, and she, for the first time in years, didn't feel like she was carrying everything alone. When the sun began to set and Robert said goodbye, Leo and Lily hugged him spontaneously. Sarah walked him to the building door. "Thank you for today," she said sincerely. "It was much more than you imagine." "I'm the one who should thank you," Robert replied. "It's been a long time since I had such a good day. Your children are incredible, Sarah. You raised them very well." She smiled, a tired but happy smile. "They're just like that. I just try to keep up." Robert hesitated for a moment, then spoke what he was thinking. "I really want to go to the fair tomorrow, if you'll let me." "Of course I'll let you," Sarah said. "It'll be good to have you there." That night, after the children fell asleep, still talking excitedly about the day, Sarah stayed awake for a long time. Something was happening, something she couldn't name yet. It wasn't just attraction, though there was that too. It was a deeper connection, a feeling that Robert understood somehow the weight she carried. And more importantly, that he didn't try to take that weight from her, but just walk beside her, sharing the path. Robert, for his part, drove home in a state almost like a trance. The children's laughter still echoed in his mind. The image of Sarah smiling while seeing her children happy was engraved in his memory. When he arrived at the empty apartment, the contrast was brutal. The silence had never seemed so deafening. He sat on the sofa and stayed there in the dark, thinking about everything that had happened that day. He thought about how easy and natural it was to be with that family, how the children accepted him without reservations, how Sarah, even with all the understandable caution of a single mother, allowed him into their lives. And he thought about how, for the first time in many years, he felt he was exactly where he should be. The next day, Robert arrived at the school half an hour before the time set for the science fair. He was nervous, and that surprised him, nervous to see children present school projects. But when he saw Leo and Lily running toward him in the schoolyard, with their uniforms and wide smiles, everything made sense. "Uncle Robert, you came!" Leo shouted, jumping around him. "I said I would," Robert replied, ruffling the boy's hair. Sarah approached right behind, wearing a simple but beautiful dress, her hair down for the first time. She was different, lighter. Robert couldn't help but notice. "Good morning," she said. "Ready to see the projects being presented?" "Very ready." The fair was a success. Leo presented the solar system with infectious enthusiasm, explaining each planet with details that surprised even the teacher. Lily, more shy, did the volcano demonstration carefully, and when the baking soda reacted with the vinegar, making the red foam overflow. Her eyes shone with happiness. Robert applauded both with genuine pride, and Sarah, by his side, felt her eyes well up, not from sadness but from an emotion she couldn't define. Happiness, maybe, or hope, or just the rare feeling that, for a moment, everything was in the right place. After the fair, Robert invited them for ice cream. They went to a simple ice cream parlor in downtown Charlotte and spent the afternoon talking, laughing, watching the kids happily get messy. There, sitting at that plastic table in a common ice cream shop, Robert realized something fundamental. It wasn't about helping, it never was. It was about belonging. It was about finding a place where his presence made a difference, not because he had money, but because he was genuinely present. And Sarah, watching Robert interact with her children, seeing how they already treated him with familiarity and affection, allowed herself, for the first time in a long time, to imagine that maybe she didn't have to do it all alone. That maybe, just maybe, it was okay to accept company, to accept help, to accept affection. When they said goodbye that afternoon, it was already getting dark. Robert knelt and hugged Leo and Lily, who hugged back tightly. Then he looked at Sarah. "Can I call you tomorrow?" "You can," she replied, and there was promise in that word. As she returned home by bus with the children, Sarah looked out the window, feeling something new growing inside her. It was scary and comforting at the same time, because for the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving, she was living. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready to let someone be part of that life. The following weeks brought a new routine for everyone. Robert began appearing more frequently, always with some excuse that everyone knew was just a pretext to be near. He brought educational toys for the children, helped Leo with math homework, listened to Lily tell him about the book she was reading at school. Gradually, his presence stopped being a novelty and became a natural part of that small universe. Sarah watched it all with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Gratitude because she saw her children happy, because she felt the weight of loneliness diminish, because for the first time in a long time, she didn't have to solve everything alone. Fear because she knew that the closer Robert got, the more painful it would be if he decided to leave. And men left. She had learned that the hard way. One Friday night after the children fell asleep, Sarah and Robert stayed talking in the small living room. She had made some coffee, and they sat on the worn sofa, maintaining a respectful distance but conscious of the proximity. The television was on mute, just projecting lights that danced on the walls. "Can I ask you a question?" Robert said, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled. "Sure. Why are you so afraid of accepting help?" Sarah was surprised by the frankness of the question. She looked at the coffee in her cup, thinking of the answer. "It's not that I don't accept help. It's that I learned that people leave. And when they leave, you're left with the hole. I can deal with the difficulties, I've always dealt with them, but I don't know if I can deal with the absence of someone who became part of our lives." Robert nodded, understanding more than she imagined. "And if I tell you that I don't intend to leave?" Sarah laughed, but it was a laugh without joy. "Everyone says that. My children's father said that. My own father said that to my mother before leaving when I was 10. Words are easy, Robert. It's staying that's hard." "I know," he admitted. "And I'm not going to try to convince you with words. I just want you to know that I'm here because I want to be, not out of pity, not out of obligation, but because in the last few months you all showed me something I didn't even know was missing from my life." "And what was it?" "Purpose," Robert replied with raw sincerity. "I built a company, saved money, got everything I thought I wanted, but when I came home, it was just empty. Silence. And I thought that's just how it was, that I had chosen this path and had to accept it. Until I met you all." Sarah felt something tighten in her chest. She didn't know if she should believe, if she should allow herself to believe. But there was something in his eyes, in the way he spoke, that sounded true. "I'm afraid," she confessed softly. "Afraid of letting you in and then having to explain to my children why you left. They've already gotten so attached. Leo talks about you every day. Lily drew you along with us in her family drawing at school." Robert felt his eyes sting. "I saw the drawing, she showed it to me. It had me, you, her and Leo, and it had written underneath, 'My family.'" Sarah nodded, her eyes welling up. "Do you understand the weight of that? She already sees you as part of the family. What if you change your mind?" Robert reached out, hesitant, and lightly touched her fingers. Sarah didn't pull away. "And what if I don't change it? What if this is exactly what I always wanted without knowing it?" They stayed like that, sitting on the sofa, holding hands in silence. They didn't need more words at that moment, just each other's presence, the silent promise that they were going to try. The following days brought a new lightness. Robert began having dinner with them on weekends, and Sarah, little by little, lowered her defenses. She allowed him to help with the groceries, to share some expenses without her needing to pay him back later. She allowed him to participate in decisions about the children, to give opinions on school, education, and the future. Leo and Lily flourished with the attention. Robert took them to the park on Saturdays, played soccer with Leo, pushed Lily on the swing. He helped with homework with a patience that surprised even himself. He discovered he liked it. He liked the routine, the controlled chaos, the conversations about nothing and everything at the same time. But it wasn't all flowers. There were moments of tension, inevitable when two such different lives try to fit together. One afternoon, Robert arrived with expensive gifts for the children, new tablets he thought would help with their studies. Sarah reacted badly. "Robert, I've already told you. I don't want my children growing up thinking everything is easy, that things fall from the sky. They need to understand value, effort." "I just wanted to help," he defended himself, hurt. "I thought it would be useful for school." "And it is. But you have to ask me first. I am their mother. You can't just decide these things on your own." The silence that followed was tense. Robert realized he had crossed a line. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "You're right. I got excited and didn't think. It won't happen again." Sarah sighed, feeling the anger melt away. "I know your intention is good, but I need you to understand that I raised them with very clear values, and I don't want that to change just because there's more money available now." "I understand," Robert said, "and I respect that. I'm truly sorry." It was their first fight, small but important, because it showed they could disagree and still respect each other, that they could have conflicts and resolve them with conversation, without explosions, without doors slamming. Over time, Robert began to understand the boundaries better. He learned to ask before doing, to respect Sarah's decisions about the children, to find ways to help without disrespecting her independence. And Sarah, for her part, learned not to see every gesture as an attempt to take control, but as genuine care. There was a night when everything changed. It was a rainy Sunday and Robert had stayed for dinner. After they ate, he helped wash the dishes while Sarah put the children to bed. When she returned to the kitchen, she found everything clean and organized, and Robert standing near the window watching the rain fall. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, approaching him. "About how my life has changed," he replied, without taking his eyes off the window. 6 months ago, I was alone in my big apartment thinking everything was fine. And now I'm here, in this small apartment, washing dishes and being happier than I've ever been. Sarah felt her heart race. She leaned beside him, also looking at the rain. "Are you sure about that? Sure that this is what you want? Because there's still time to go back, before it gets too complicated." Robert finally looked at her. "Sarah, it's already complicated. It's been complicated since the day I saw you at the supermarket, and I don't want to go back. I want to stay." And then, for the first time, he did what he had been wanting to do for weeks. He leaned in and kissed Sarah, slowly, respectfully, but loaded with feeling. She went tense for a second, then allowed herself to relax, to kiss back. When they separated, her eyes were closed and she was breathing deeply. "I'm afraid too," Robert whispered. "Afraid of ruining this. Afraid of not being good enough as a father for them. Afraid that you'll realize you can do better without me." Sarah opened her eyes and looked at him intensely. "Do you think I would have let you get this far if I thought you weren't good enough? I protect my children above all else, Robert, and I only let you in because I saw who you really are." "And who am I?" "Someone good. Someone who wants to be here for the right reasons. Someone who treats my children with true affection, not faked. And someone who, for the first time in a long time, makes me think that maybe I deserve to be happy too." "You do deserve it," Robert said, holding her face delicately. "You deserve much more than I can give." "It's not about what you can give," Sarah replied. "It's about you being here. It's about you showing up day after day without giving up. It's about you having become part of our lives, without us even realizing how." They stayed there, embraced in the small kitchen, listening to the rain fall outside and the comfortable silence of the apartment. And at that moment, both knew there was no going back. They had fallen in love, not in an explosive and dramatic way, but in a gradual and profound way, built on respect, shared life, and daily choices. In the following days, the dynamic changed subtly. There were more casual touches, more lingering looks, more moments stolen when the children weren't looking. Leo and Lily noticed, in the way children always notice, and they seemed happy about it. They asked at one point if Uncle Robert was going to live with them. Sarah replied with caution, saying they were still talking about it, but that the important thing was that he was part of their family now, wherever he lived. Robert began to rethink his entire life. The big empty apartment no longer made sense. The solitary routine seemed absurd. He began to question what really mattered, what he wanted for the coming years, for the rest of his life. And all the answers led to the same place, to Sarah, Leo, and Lily. There was internal resistance, of course, fear of going too fast, of romanticizing the situation, of trying to fill a void with other people's lives. But every time those thoughts came, he remembered how he felt when he was with them. Alive, present, needed, and not in an artificial or forced way, but a genuine one. Sarah, for her part, struggled with her own demons. The voice that said she didn't deserve it, that men like Robert didn't stay with women like her, that all of this would eventually collapse. But every time she looked at him playing with her children, every time he kissed her with care, every time he asked about her day and really listened to the answer, that voice grew weaker. On a Saturday morning, 2 months after the kiss in the kitchen, Robert arrived earlier than usual. He had a serious expression on his face, and Sarah felt her heart tighten. Here it came. The moment she always knew would come. He was going to say it was too much, that he couldn't continue, that his life was something else. But when he spoke, it was completely different from what she imagined. "Sarah, I want to talk to you about something important. I know we've been together for a short time, and I don't want to pressure you, but I need to tell you what I'm feeling because I can't keep it inside anymore." She sat down, tense, waiting. Robert continued, choosing his words carefully. I love you, I love your children, and I want to be part of this family for real. Not as a visitor, not as someone who drops by once in a while. I want to be here, every day, in the good times and the hard ones. Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. Robert, are you sure of what you're saying? Because if you have any doubt, it's better to stop now. I've never been so sure of anything in my life, he replied with conviction. I know my life is different from yours. I know we come from different places. But I don't want that empty life anymore. I want this one. This life with you, with Leo, with Lily. This life that is messy and hard, but that is real. Sarah let the tears fall freely. What if it doesn't work? What if you regret it? What if it does work? Robert countered. What if this is exactly what we've always needed? She was silent for a long moment, processing it all. Then she wiped her tears and looked into his eyes. I love you too, and it terrifies me. But I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of doing everything alone. And if you're willing to embark on this madness, then I accept. Robert pulled her into a tight hug, feeling the relief take over his entire being. I promise, he whispered. I promise I'll make it worth it. And Sarah, for the first time in many years, allowed herself to believe in promises. The decision to move in together wasn't made impulsively. They spent almost 2 months talking, planning, thinking about every detail. Robert suggested they move to his apartment, but Sarah hesitated. That was his world, and she was afraid of feeling out of place, that the children would lose the essence of who they were. After many conversations, they reached an agreement. They would look for a new house, a place that belonged to everyone from the start, without the baggage of either of them. They found a rental house in the Plaza Midwood neighborhood of Charlotte. It wasn't luxurious, but it was spacious enough for each child to have their own room. It had a small backyard where Leo could play soccer, and it was near the twins' school. Robert insisted that Sarah choose everything, from the decoration to the furniture. He wanted her to feel like she owned that space as much as he did. The move happened on a sunny Saturday in November. Robert hired a truck to bring the furniture from Sarah's apartment, which was little but loaded with memories. Each piece represented an achievement, something she had bought with her own sweat. Robert respected that. He didn't suggest replacing anything, he just supplemented it with what was missing. Leo and Lily were euphoric. They ran through the new house, choosing their rooms, planning where everything would go. Lily wanted to paint the bedroom walls light pink, and Robert took her to choose the paint that same day. Leo wanted to put up football posters, and together they went looking for the best ones. They were small moments, but they built something bigger. They built a family. Sarah watched it all with a lump in her throat. She was happy, deeply happy, but also scared. So much change, so many new things. Was she doing the right thing? What if all this collapsed? How would she explain it to her children? Robert found her standing in the empty living room, looking out the window. Is everything okay? He asked, hugging her from behind. I'm afraid, she confessed. Afraid that this is too good to be true. I'm afraid too, he admitted. Afraid of not being the father they deserve. Afraid of disappointing you, but we're going to learn together, okay? And if we make a mistake, we'll fix it. The important thing is that we're here, trying. Sarah turned in his arms and kissed him. Thank you for all of this, for making us feel important. So you are important, Robert replied. You are the most important thing in my life. The first days in the new house were a mix of enchantment and challenges. They had to establish new routines, learn to share space, and adjust expectations. Leo woke up early and wanted to play, and Robert had to get used to waking up with him so as not to miss those moments. Lily liked to read before bed, and he began sitting with her, listening to the stories the girl told with shining eyes. Sarah reduced her workload. Robert insisted, saying she didn't need to kill herself working in 3 different apartment complexes. She resisted at first, but then accepted staying with only one of the jobs, part-time. She needed to get used to the idea that she wasn't alone, that she could share the weight. It was hard, too hard. But slowly, she gave in. There were conflicts, of course. It's impossible not to have them when 4 people with different stories and habits try to live under the same roof. Leo, used to making a mess without great consequences in the small apartment, had to learn to organize things. Robert, used to silence, had to adapt to the constant noise of children. Sarah, used to making all decisions alone, had to learn to share command. The first serious fight happened 3 weeks after the move. Leo had gotten a low grade on a spelling test, and Sarah was very angry. She said he was going to be grounded, no video games for a week. Robert, without thinking, interfered, saying he thought the punishment was exaggerated, that it was just 1 grade, that the boy was trying. Sarah exploded. "What do you mean you think it's exaggerated? I know my son, Robert. He didn't try, he was too lazy to study, and I'm not going to accept that." "But he's just a child," Robert defended. "A low grade isn't the end of the world. To you it might not be, but to me it is," Sarah countered, her voice raised. "You grew up with everything, Robert. You had opportunities. My children will only have opportunities if they study, if they work hard. I can't let it slide." Robert fell silent, realizing he had crossed a line. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "You're right, I spoke without thinking." "It's not about being right," Sarah said, calmer. "It's about you understanding that their education is the only inheritance I can leave, and I'm not going to give that up." "I understand," Robert replied, "and I promise I won't interfere again without talking to you first." It was a tense moment, but a necessary one. It established boundaries, defined roles. Robert wasn't the children's biological father, but he was taking on fatherly responsibilities, and that meant respecting Sarah's decisions, supporting her, but not overstepping. Leo served his punishment, and Robert helped him study for the next test. They sat together at the kitchen table, reviewing the content, doing exercises. And when Leo got a good grade on the next test, the celebration was collective. Sarah made the boys' favorite cake, and they all had dinner together, happy. Small victories like that built the foundation of the new family. Lily began calling Robert Dad in some situations, casually, without making a fuss. The first time it happened, he felt his heart almost stop. They were at the supermarket, and Lily asked if she could choose a cereal. "Dad, can I get this one?" Robert looked at her, moved. "You can, sweetie." Sarah, who was beside him, held his hand and squeezed it. Everything was fine. More than that, it was right. The months went by and the dynamics adjusted. Robert began participating in school meetings, met the teachers, and got involved in the children's activities. Sarah, for her part, began to trust more, to share concerns, to accept that she didn't need to carry everything alone. There was an especially marking moment on a Sunday afternoon. They were all in the living room, Robert helping Leo with a model, Sarah and Lily putting together a puzzle. The sound of the television was low in the background, the smell of fresh coffee coming from the kitchen. And suddenly Robert looked around and realized this was happiness, simple, everyday, but real. Sarah noticed his look and smiled. "What are you thinking about?" "About how I almost missed this," he replied. "If on that day at the supermarket I had just walked past, ignored you, followed my life." "But you didn't pass by," Sarah said. "You stopped, you stayed." "And it was the best decision I ever made," Robert affirmed. Leo, without really understanding the context, just commented, "Uncle Robert, you're always going to stay with us, right?" "Always," Robert promised. "I'm not going anywhere." Lily put down the puzzle and went to sit on Robert's lap. "You're our dad now, right?" Robert looked at Sarah, asking for silent permission. She nodded slightly, her eyes welling up. "If you want me to be, then yes, I am." "We want you to," Leo and Lily said together. It was in that moment, in that simple declaration from 2 8-year-olds, that Robert realized he had everything he ever wanted. It wasn't the luxurious apartment. It wasn't the imported car. It wasn't the successful company. It was this. It was being a father. It was being a partner. It was belonging. Sarah, that night, after the children fell asleep, lay down beside Robert and stared at the ceiling. "You know they never had a real father, right? Their biological father left before they could even form memories." "I know," Robert replied, holding her hand. "Then I need you to understand the weight of this. They see you as their father now, and if you decide to leave, it will break them." "I'm not going anywhere, Sarah," Robert said, turning to look into her eyes. "I've told you, and I'll repeat it as many times as necessary. I'm here to stay. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." "How can you be so sure?" she asked, her voice failing. "Because for the first time in my life I know who I am," he replied. "I am your partner. I am Leo and Lily's father. I am part of this family. And this isn't something I took on out of obligation or impulse. It's something I choose every day, consciously. Sarah let the tears fall. "I love you, and it terrifies me how much I love you." "I love you too," Robert said, wiping her tears with his thumb. "And we're going to be fine. I promise we're going to be fine." That night, embraced in the bed of the house that was theirs, all four of theirs, Sarah finally allowed the last barrier to fall. She allowed herself to trust completely. She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the fairy tale could be real. The following months were about consolidation. The routine became natural, conflicts decreased, and trust grew. Robert was completely integrated into the children's lives. He went to school performances, helped with homework, consoled them when they were sad, and celebrated when they were happy. He wasn't a stepfather trying to be a father. He was a father in every sense of the word. Sarah, for her part, flourished. With more free time, she began taking a technical course in administration, something she always wanted but never had the means for. Robert encouraged her, helped with the tuition, and stayed with the children while she studied. And she, for the first time, allowed herself to have her own dreams beyond just surviving. On Sarah's birthday night, Robert prepared a surprise. He organized a dinner at home with the children's help. They decorated everything, made a lopsided cake full of love, and when Sarah arrived from her course, she found her family waiting for her with huge smiles. After dinner, after the children went to sleep, Robert took her to the balcony of the house. There were stars in the sky, a soft breeze, and a comfortable silence. He held her hands and looked into her eyes with intensity. "Sarah, in all these months, you and the children have given me something I never had. A family, a purpose, a reason to wake up happy every day. And I want to spend the rest of my life giving that back." And then, to her surprise, Robert knelt down, taking a small box from his pocket. It wasn't an expensive ring, full of diamonds. It was a simple, beautiful ring, but without ostentation, exactly the way she would like it. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Let me be your husband. Let me be Leo and Lily's father officially. Let's build this together, forever." Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, crying. "Yes," she replied through sobs. "Yes, I will." Robert put the ring on her finger and stood up, pulling her into a tight hug. At that moment, both of their lives were completed in a way they never imagined possible. When they told the children the next day, Leo and Lily jumped for joy. "Does it mean we're going to be a real family for real?" Leo asked. "We already are a real family," Sarah corrected, "but now it's going to be official." "And can I call you Dad at school?" Lily asked Robert. "You can," he replied, his eyes full of tears. "I would love that." The preparations for the wedding were simple. They didn't want anything big, just something intimate with the people who really mattered. They set the date for 2 months later, enough time to organize everything without stress. And as the days went by, as they planned for the future, everyone knew they had found something rare. It wasn't perfect. It had challenges and conflicts like any family. But it was real. It was built on a solid foundation of respect, love, and daily choices to be present. Robert looked at Sarah and saw the strong woman who had conquered him not through fragility but through strength. Sarah looked at Robert and saw the man who chose to stay when he could have walked away. And the children, Leo and Lily, looked at both and saw what every child deserves to see: love, stability, and the promise that they would never be alone. Life had given all of them a second chance, and this time they weren't going to waste it. The wedding day dawned with a perfect blue sky over Charlotte. It was a Saturday in January, with that pleasant southern summer heat. Sarah woke up early, her heart racing and her hands trembling. Not from fear, but from pure emotion. It was really happening. After so many years fighting alone, so many sleepless nights wondering if she would ever have someone by her side, she was about to marry a man who truly loved her. The ceremony would be simple at the courthouse, followed by lunch at a small restaurant with only a few close friends, and Sarah's mother, Mary, who came from West Virginia especially for the day. There was no luxury, no ostentation, just love, just presence. Lily entered her mother's room wearing the light yellow dress she had chosen for the wedding, with a floral headband in her hair. "Mum, you look beautiful," the girl said, her eyes shining. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror. She wore a simple white dress bought at a downtown shop, but it fit her body perfectly. Her hair was down with natural waves, and light makeup highlighted her brown eyes. She was beautiful, but more than that, She was radiant. Leo appeared right behind his sister, looking awkward in the suit Robert had bought for him. "Mom, the tie is too tight," he complained, trying to loosen the knot. Sarah laughed and adjusted her son's tie. "There, now it's perfect. We're going to be a real family now, right?" Leo asked with that strange seriousness that sometimes took hold of him. "We already are a family, my love," Sarah replied, kneeling in front of him. "But today we're going to celebrate that, and it's going to be beautiful." Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Robert was getting ready at the apartment he still kept, but which he now used only as an office. He was nervous, running his hand through his hair repeatedly, adjusting his suit for the 10th time. His business partner, Mark, who would be the witness, laughed at his anxiety. "Man, you're more nervous than when we closed that $1 million contract," Mark joked. "It's different," Robert replied. "This is more important than any contract." Mark turned serious. "I've known you for 15 years, Robert, and I've never seen you as happy as you've been in the last few months. This woman, these children, they've transformed you." "They saved me," Robert corrected. "I was living on autopilot, Mark, working, making money, but not feeling anything. And now I wake up every day with a purpose, with a reason." "You deserve this, man," Mark said, patting his friend's shoulder. "Now let's go, your bride is waiting for you." The courthouse was in downtown Charlotte, an old but charming building. When Robert arrived, Sarah was already there, with Leo and Lily on either side, and her mother Mary right behind. He stopped for a second, just looking at that scene. The woman he loved, radiant with happiness, the children who had become his own, neat and smiling, and he knew with absolute certainty that he was in the right place. The ceremony was quick but intense. When it came time for the vows, the justice of the peace asked if Robert accepted Sarah as his wife, to love and respect in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, until life did them part. "I do," Robert said, his voice firm, looking into Sarah's eyes. And when it was Sarah's turn, she replied with the same conviction, but with her eyes welling up. "I do." Rings were exchanged, simple gold bands that represented much more than their material value. They represented commitment, choice, and a future. But it was in the next moment that something extraordinary happened. Robert, who had prearranged everything with the justice, asked permission to speak. The justice nodded, curious. Robert turned to Leo and Lily, who were watching everything closely. He knelt to their level, taking 2 small envelopes from his blazer pocket. "Leo, Lily, I know you're still very young, but I want you to understand what I'm about to say now." The children were attentive and curious. Sarah looked on without understanding, her heart racing. "Since the day I met you, you've treated me with affection. You've accepted me into your lives. You've given me the chance to be part of this family. And today, besides marrying your mother, I want to do something else." He opened the envelopes and pulled out 2 documents. "These are your adoption papers. I started the process 2 months ago, and it was approved yesterday. If you accept, and if your mother accepts, I want to adopt you officially. I want to be your father, not just in my heart, but also on paper." Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, tears flowing freely. She had no idea. Robert had done everything in secret with the help of a lawyer, waiting for the approval to make this surprise on their wedding day. Leo looked at his mother, then at Robert. "Does it mean you're going to be our real dad on the document too?" "Yes," Robert replied, his voice thick with emotion. "If you want." "We want to," Leo and Lily shouted together, jumping onto his neck. Robert hugged them tightly, feeling the tears fall without being able to hold them back. Sarah joined the hug, everyone crying, everyone laughing, everyone living that moment that would be marked forever. Mary, Sarah's mother, watched everything with a handkerchief in her hand, wiping her own tears. She never thought she would see her daughter so happy, that she would see her grandchildren so loved. After the ceremony, after the photos, after the hugs, they all went to the restaurant. It was a simple but cozy place with good home-cooked food. They laughed, talked, and celebrated. Leo and Lily wouldn't let go of Robert, holding his hand, sitting on his lap, calling him Dad every other sentence. During lunch, Mary pulled Sarah aside. "My daughter, you deserve this. You deserve all this happiness. After everything you went through, everything you fought for, you found a real man." Sarah hugged her mother, feeling the weight of all those years of struggle dissolve in that embrace. "I was so afraid, Mom. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid he would leave. afraid to give myself over. But you did give yourself over, Mary said. And look where you are now. You're not alone anymore, daughter, and neither are my grandchildren. As the day was ending, and the stars began to appear in the Charlotte sky, Robert and Sarah found themselves alone for a moment on the restaurant's balcony, while the children played inside under Mary's watchful eyes. "Thank you," Sarah said, holding his hands, "for the adoption, for everything." "I'm the one who should thank you," Robert replied, "for letting me in, for trusting me, for giving me this family. You know, that day at the supermarket changed everything, right?" Sarah said with a smile. "If you hadn't stopped, if you hadn't paid for those groceries." "I would have stopped anyway," Robert interrupted. "Because it wasn't about the money, it was about you, about the dignity you showed even in difficulty, about the strength you carry without realizing it. I saw all that in that moment, and something inside me knew you were special." "And you saw two children who needed a father," Sarah said, but without bitterness, just stating a fact. "I saw two incredible children," Robert corrected, "who taught me what it is to love without expecting anything in return, who showed me that family isn't about blood, it's about presence. And I saw a woman who made me want to be better, want to be present, want to build something real." They stayed there, embraced, looking at the stars, feeling the weight and the lightness of that day. Weight because it was a huge commitment, a responsibility that would last a lifetime. Lightness because finally, after so long, they were no longer alone. The following months were about adapting to the new reality. Robert finalized the adoption, and Leo and Lily began to carry his last name as well. Robert Miller, Sarah Miller, Leo Miller, Lily Miller. A family, on paper and in the heart. Life went on, with its daily challenges, its bills to pay, its problems to solve. But now they were faced together. Sarah finished her technical course in administration and got a better job in an office with fixed hours and dignity. Robert continued with the company, but now with a better balance between work and family. He arrived home on time, had dinner with everyone, helped with homework, and participated in daily life. Leo and Lily grew up surrounded by love and stability. They had challenges like any child, but they knew they could count on their parents, plural, parents. No longer just a mother carrying everything alone, but two adults committed to raising them in the best way possible. A year after the wedding, on a random Tuesday night, after the children fell asleep, Sarah and Robert were sitting on the living room sofa, watching a movie without paying much attention. She looked around at the house that was now theirs, at the life they had built together. "Do you remember that day at the supermarket?" she asked out of nowhere. "How could I forget?" Robert replied, smiling. "I was so ashamed," Sarah continued, "so angry at myself for not having enough money, and then you appeared out of nowhere and paid. I thought I would never see you again, that it would just be a strange moment I would eventually forget." "And I thought it would just be a quick gesture," Robert said, "that I would pay, you would thank me, and everyone would go on with their lives. But when you insisted on paying back the money, when you went after my contact, something changed, because I realized you weren't like other people. You had principles, values, dignity. We've been through so much since then," Sarah said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "So much change, so much fear, so much uncertainty." "But we stayed," Robert completed. "Despite everything, we chose to stay. And it was in that moment, in that simple conversation on a common night, that both understood the fundamental truth of their lives. It wasn't about the money Robert paid that day. It wasn't about the debt Sarah cleared. It was about choices. Daily choices to be present, to love, to build. Choices to see in the other not just someone in difficulty or someone with resources, but a partner, a companion, a love. The story that began with embarrassment in a supermarket transformed into a story of reconstruction, of family, of belonging. Robert found the purpose that was missing in his empty life. Sarah found the support she never had, but without losing her independence. Leo and Lily found a father who chose to love them, not out of biological obligation, but by conscious and daily choice. And altogether they found something that many people spend their whole lives looking for. They found a place to call home, not just a house, but a feeling, the certainty that no matter what happened, they would be together, the silent promise that hard days would be faced together, and good days would be celebrated with shared joy. Years later, when Leo and Lily were already teenagers, Robert was helping Leo with an essay about family for school. The boy, now 15, asked his father how he would define family. Robert thought for a long moment, remembering everything they had lived through, all the path they had traveled. Then he replied with the sincerity that always marked his relationship with his children. Family isn't about blood, Leo. It's about choice. It's about being present. It's about loving in the good days and the bad. It's about building something together, even when it's hard. Your mother taught me that. You and your sister taught me that. Leo noted his father's words and smiled. I think I'm going to use that in the essay. And that night, when Sarah returned from work and found them all there, sitting at the table, eating and talking, she stopped for a second at the door, just observing. Observing the husband she found when she least expected it. Observing the children she raised with so much love and effort, now supported also by the affection of a present father. And she allowed herself to recognize the truth. They deserved that. They all deserved it. Because in the end it wasn't a fairy tale where a prince saved a princess. It was the story of two broken people who found each other at the right time and chose to mend themselves together. It was the story of two children who gained a father not by accident, but by true love. It was the story of a family that was born not from blood, but from the daily choice to be present. And that, above all, was a story of hope. Hope that no matter how hard the path is, no matter how many times life knocks us down, there is always the possibility of starting over. There is always the chance to find love, family, belonging. You just have to be willing to believe, to try and not give up. Robert never forgot that moment at the supermarket. He carried forever the image of Sarah returning items with her head held high, maintaining her dignity even in difficulty. That image reminded him every day of what really mattered in life. It wasn't money, it wasn't professional success, it was character, it was strength, it was love. And Sarah never forgot that simple gesture from a stranger who decided to help without expecting anything in return. That gesture opened a door she didn't even know existed. The door to a life she thought she would never have. A life where she didn't have to do everything alone. A life where she could be loved exactly as she was. The sun set over Charlotte that night, as it did every night. But inside that house, inside that family, there was a light of its own. A light made of choices, of commitments, of true love. And that light, they knew, would never go out. Dear listeners, we hope that Sarah and Robert's story has touched your heart deeply. If you were moved by this journey of resilience, love and family, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most.